Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, today with some not so good news regarding Lesta's lawsuit with the Russian government. The case has concluded, and I don't think anyone's really surprised by the outcome of this case in terms of, what the verdict was going to be, but what's happening with Lesta seems to be very much not good at all. We're going to get into all that here. I'm reading from an article linked in the description down below if you want to check it out for yourselves. But first, a little bit of context. Who is Lesta? Why should you care about them? So forth and so on. Lesta was the original developer of World of Warships back in the day. They were bought up by Wargaming, I think in 2014, 2013, and rebranded as Wargaming St. Petersburg, because they operated out of St. Petersburg, and they developed and ran World of Warships for years up until the Lesta Wargaming split in 2022. Wargaming pulled out of Russia and Belarus following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and they turned all of their IPs in Russia and Belarus over to Lesta, who developed and ran them for, 2022 until now, apparently, as a separate entity. So Lesta and Wargaming are not one company anymore. They're two separate companies. Korabley, Lesta's version of World of Warships, is a separate game from World of Warships. And to be perfectly clear, the background footage today is Korabley, probably the last of it you're ever going to see on the channel. So this is Lesta's version of World of Warships, if you're wondering why it looks a little bit different here and there, and we'll get into that later. But anyway, so from 2022 onward, Lesta and Wargaming are two separate companies. What happened is that earlier in April this year, the Russian government moved to seize all of Lesta's assets. That was the big headlines we saw pop up a couple of months ago. We didn't know why. A little while later, it came out that the Russian government's charging Lesta, the company, the CEO, guy by the name of Karazayev, and the CEO of Wargaming, man by the name of Viktor Kivsley, with extremism. Terrorism, basically. And, the court date was set. They asked for an open court, meaning that the media could be in and, hear Lesta's side of the case. The Russian government said no. And on the 3rd of June, yesterday, I'm recording this on Wednesday, the trial concluded, and to nobody's surprise, the Russian government won. What a surprise, right? But anyway, the outcome of the trial, I guess not really the outcome, but the fallout of the trial, sort of things get a little bit more interesting. So, checking out the article is titled, "The Assets of Lesta Games Will Be Transferred to the State. The court upheld the charges against its owner for extremism." The group of companies, Lesta Games, lost in court. The Tagansky District Court of Moscow ruled that its owner, Malik Katazayev, created an extremist association with Viktor Kivsley, the head of the former parent company of Lesta Games, Wargaming. So Viktor Kivsley, he's the man that developed Wargaming, developed World of Tanks, World of Warships. Well, he owned the company that started all that, right? He still owns the company today. So he and the owner of Lesta, Katazayev, are now considered terrorists by the Russian government, basically. Hence why they're seizing the assets of Lesta Games. The activities of this association will now be prohibited in Russia. It is reported that the court's decision serves as grounds for including Katazayev along with Kivsley in the register of extremist and terrorist. Additionally, the court ruled that the three Russian legal entities of Lesta Games, Lesta LLC, Lesta Games Moscow LLC, and Lesta Games Agency LLC, must be fully transferred to the state. The newspaper Kommersant and agency TASS, citing their sources in law enforcement, report that the extremist charges does not apply to Lesta Games itself. It also does not affect the group's contractors, its clients, or gamers who played its games. Furthermore, the court decision will not lead to a ban in Russia of the game World of Tanks, World of Warships, and Tanks Blitz. Lesta Games announced in its official Telegram channel that they did not export their profits abroad and conducted business honestly. Moreover, in recent years, they have actively supported the development of the gaming industry in Russia, as well as contributed, quote, significantly to the patriotic education of the citizens of our country. If that's not a line straight out of North Korea, I don't know what is. The group of companies is now preparing to file an appeal. So you might be thinking, well, what did they get them on terrorist charges with? Well, if you remember back in 2020, is it like late 22 or early 23, Wargaming had the fundraising campaign with United 24, which is a Ukrainian charity to raise money for ambulances for Ukraine, where you could buy like the Ukrainian camos and decals in game, and wood warships, wood tanks, and wood warplanes, and that money was used to purchase ambulances for Ukraine. The way it worked, from my understanding, is that Wargaming raised the money, bought the ambulances, and then gave them to Ukraine. So like not like they transferred the money to Ukraine. But this was Wargaming doing this, not Lesta. But under the eyes of the Russian government, they see Lesta as Wargaming, basically. There's no difference between the two in their eyes. Now, where it gets interesting for those that enjoy playing Mir Korabley, there's some confusion as to what's actually going on. This article says that the activities of Lesta are now prohibited in Russia, meaning that, well, Mir Korabley, Mir Tankov, and whatever they call World War planes, that sounds like, oh, that's going to be banned now. But this article has an update saying that the court did not ban the operation of Lesta games in Russia. But other articles that I've read talking about this case do not have this update. So this article is saying that, the game company can continue to operate in Russia as, I'm assuming, a state-ran gaming studio now. But the other ones I've read, they don't state that. So that's where a little bit of the confusion is coming in right now. It is possible that this journal or whatever is a little bit more up to date and up to speed with the news. As of right now, the other ones have not been updated, so I'm just throwing that out there. But anyway, if it does continue to operate, now quite literally, Lesta is ran by the Russian government. So it's kind of funny looking back at like when the Russian-Ukrainian war broke out all those years ago, and then my comment section reflected with, "Oh, you're supporting Russia," no, even though like Wargaming outsources its profits to Cyprus, where most of the money stays. Then they pay their studios from there. So like very little tax money actually goes to the Russian government or any government where Wargaming has a studio. The bulk of the revenue stays in Cyprus because of the tax laws there. But now, like, if you continue to play Mir Korabley, you are literally playing like a state-ran Russian video games game where now all the profits are going to the Russian government. And that's, of course, what the government was after. There was, I think it was in the first article we looked at, Karazayev was talking about how profitable Lesta had been. They had, like, I think it was like $250 million US in revenue in the years since Wargaming let them go, and I think 60 million of that was profit. So that is indeed a large chunk of change for the Russian government to see, not going in their pockets. Because keep in mind, now that Lesta is separated from Wargaming and is stuck in Russia and St. Petersburg, they can't use the tax loophole of Cyprus to hide their tax money from the Russian government. Now the Russian government sees it all in-house and goes, oh, that would be very nice if that was all mine. So it looked like the theory that it was going to get, and it very well may still happen, where the Russian government might auction off the studio to probably VK Holdings. That was a big theory with this news breaking a few months ago, that VK Holdings, which is a tech conglomerate owned by one of the Russian oligarchs, was going to get a hold of Lesta. That still very well may be the case at this moment forth if they continue to operate. It's very, very possible that they might just take all the assets, the computers and studio, real estate, whatever cash that Lesta does have laying around, and they might just pocket all of it, right? Or they'll probably just keep the game running and just milk it for what it's worth for the next, 4 or 5 years. So this obviously sucks for Lesta. I mean, now look, beyond the scope of the war, just talking about the people here, like, look, these are people that they didn't choose to be born in Russia, be born under Putin's regime, right? And this was a pretty good and stable job for a lot of people working there that are just trying to make ends meet. They're just trying to survive and provide for their family. And now a lot of that's in jeopardy with the Russian government seizing Lesta Games. And already, supposedly, there's been like 200 people that have resigned from Lesta when all this was going down. I believe that happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that's 200 jobs just gone. And again, depending upon what Russia decides to do with the studio, be it they auction it off and it keeps operating now in the pocket of one of the oligarchs, or they just liquidate all the assets and grab the cash, you know, it's probably not going to be a great time for these people that didn't really have any other options. I know there's some of the comments are pretty heartless in my opinion. Like, yes, Russia invading Ukraine's bad, war's bad, people dying's bad, but there's other things that happen besides just, you know, people dying in war, which is terrible. It's very bad. Not trying to downplay that at all, but if you're just stuck in like Russia, you're born there, you can't really afford to leave, you have a family, you can't afford to take your family out of there, you know, that's a hard call to make. Now you're stuck in a country with all these sanctions on them, and not a lot of money was in Russia in the first place. And you have one of the few, you know, tech sector jobs that pays pretty well in Russia, and then now this happens. As someone that, you know, I'm finalizing my mortgage papers now for my very first house. If something like this happens to me, I don't even know what would even, you know, what I would even do at that point, right? You got a mortgage, or you got rent, you got, you know, a family you have to provide for. So I do feel for these people, and this does suck very much so. Trying to look beyond the fact that, you know, the slightly different version of the game may not be around for too much longer, right? You know, trying to bring some real life perspective into what's going on here, rather than, oh, I'm not going to be able to play my slightly different version of World of Warships anymore, right? So that's all pixels and stuff. This affects real life people. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So this is terrible. It's an outcome that, you know, we all pretty much knew was going to happen, but as to what happens now afterwards, it's a little unclear at the moment. I doubt the appeal will go very far, obviously. I guess we'll see what happens afterwards, but either way, this does seem like it's the beginning of the end, for sure, for Lesta Games, which is also sad because this is the studio that gave us World of Warships, the game we all know and love. You know, despite what Wargaming does, you know, they do some good things and some not good things. You know, literally, you know, Tuesday's video I was talking about some, you know, changes to the game that I liked, and then we'll follow that up on Wednesday by talking about, you know, their monetization schemes and stuff and how I don't like that, right? But this is a studio that gave us the game that we've all played for years now. We've gotten hours and hours and hours out of enjoyment out of this game. So it's very sad to see that this is the fate that has befalled Lesta Games. So, guys, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful Thursday and a wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.